talking about an interesting concept which I don't get a lot of buzz for, which is time travel in Microsoft Fabric. Now, why am I talking about this concept? Now, one thing I like to do is state the problem which I have, which I had, which made me to carry out the concept. So, first of all, I was carrying out a simple data and engineering task which involved moving data from my Azure SQL database into my Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse. And for this, I use the Adventure Works database, which is available when you're creating an Azure SQL database as well. So once I did just a snapshot of how the database look in Visual Studio. So, but how I brought the data into my Microsoft Fabric was using a copy data activity in a pipeline. So, in Microsoft Fabric, you can create things called pipelines, which are like step by step processes which enable you to carry out your ETL, your extract, your transform, and your load data. So with the copy data activities, what I needed to provide for it was some credentials like the source, where is the data I'm collecting from, the database, the credential for it, and the destination where I wanted to. Now also specify the tables that were needed for my analysis as well. So the moment I've done that, now one good thing which I like Data Factory for, it has a large similarity with one tool that I personally like, which is Power Automate. So in Data Factory, you can add activities, or should I call them actions per se, like how you will add it in Power Automate. It has the same type of user-like interface, and one activity which you can add easily is a condition activity. So let's take, for instance, you copy this data, you can go ahead to add more actions. For example, like you notify somebody on Outlook or on Teams if the copy activity is successful using the if condition. Now, this video is not to talk about that data engineering process. Now, this video is to talk about one gem which I discovered while trying to go through my project. So I would open the notebook for this project. So once I had brought my data into my lakehouse, I wanted to run some PySpark code based on my data, do some further transformation based on my data in my lakehouse. So these are the tables which I brought in from the adventure work data into my lakehouse, and I now wanted to do some nice transformation and analysis based on the data. Now, the very first thing was just to do is normal searching through the data using the select all from the sales address. Sales address is what I'm using for this demo, the sales address table. And I noticed something interesting from the sales address data. Now, what I wanted to do in this sales address data is to combine the address line 1 and the address line 2 to probably create something like a full address column, to create a full address column. Now, for me to do this, we had this PySpark code which allowed me to combine those two column fields together. Now, that code isn't really like the major point of this video, which is to combine those two fields together. No, that's not the major point of this video. Now, once I was done combining these two fields together, now one key thought that came to me is, if you notice in this code, I saved it as a as a table. I overwrote what was in the pre-existing table. Now, it's important to know that if you want to add it as a new table, you can change the name at the save as table, and you add it as a new table. But if you don't, it would most likely add it as to the pre-existing table. Now, the moment I've done this already, now the key question I wanted to ask is, how can I undo this process? No control Z, right? No control Z. So that's when I remembered a powerful capabilities of working with Delta tables in Microsoft Fabric, which is the time travel function. The time travel function. And what you could do with the time travel function is You could first of all use a describe history. So describe history using the SQL command, describe history and specify the name of the column that you want to describe the history for. The describe history will tell you the versions that you have, the timestamp, that the as at what point in time those versions were, and the action that took place in those versions that you have in your Microsoft, in your lakehouse for that particular table. So there are two ways you can restore a version. You can either restore it by doing the version number or based on the timestamp that you want. Now, I like the version number, for instance, because when I started the project, when I started this, I knew I did this describe history and I saw only one and zero, version one and zero. So I knew that this version one and zero were were the versions which I had as well, which I had before. So I can either restore it to version one or restore it to version zero using my fabric using a fabric script. So now that I check the data just to check if the new data was added successfully, that's what this SQL command is. So now to restore this version number, now the beauty of this is this code which is needed for this is you can find it in the Microsoft Learn link, which I'll probably drop at the bottom of this video. You can find this code in the link already on Microsoft Learn. So if you go to the working with data tables in Spark, you'll find the code. Now, just to explain what the code does a bit, is you specify a data frame, the Spark read format, and the Delta table because you're working with Delta tables, and you specify the version you want to recover, and you have to get the load of the delta part. Now, for you to get the delta part, you can just hover around your table, and you can probably click on this on your lakehouse and you can click on copy part. So that will get you the delta part and you can keep it in quotation. Now, the moment you get the delta part, you can now write back that version into the previous table that you had already. So when I run this code, with that code, that returns the data back to the data without the full address added. The data without the full address added to it. So that's just how you can do simple stuff like time travel in Microsoft Fabric. Now, it's not actual time travel, but the concept is Microsoft Fabric saves different of versions of the files which you're working on in your lakehouse to save different versions of your table. So each time you do specific transformations, specific things on your table, it saves those versions. You can always recover a previous version. Now, it's also important to note that you can clear versions because this version, like I said, it saves this version, but it's also important to know that you can clear these versions if you wouldn't need them at any point in time. I hope you learned a thing or two in this video. I highly recommend you read this working with delta tables in Spark for more insight as well. Thank you and feel free to leave